What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to the second live episode of the day. I just got back from a 3-day trip with my 3 kids. Need about 3 months to recover, but no rest for the weary. And the reason we're on is that there is breaking news in the Anna Walshe case. Authorities have now charged Brian Walshe with the murder of his wife, Anna. The 39-year-old mother of 3 went missing early on January 1st in Cohasset, Massachusetts. Her body has not been found. So here to discuss it, we have not one, but 2 guests, but only one is on with us right now. And as you know, we've got the best guests in all of true crime. Jeff Wood is the man you are looking at. He is a retired FBI special agent out of Boston, focused on gangs and gang violence, and is a seasoned investigator with more than 2 decades experience in law enforcement. We are waiting right now for Wendy Murphy, who is one of the nation's experts when it comes to domestic violence. She's also a law professor, was a Harvard law professor at one point, and we're hoping she joins us momentarily. A few quick housekeeping notes for everyone. Please follow us on Insta, Facebook, Twitter. On Twitter, we're at Podcast STS. Please support us on Patreon. Also, you can get a YouTube membership. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. And as my 8-year-old daughter says, please hit that subscribe button and the like button. It helps get the algorithm chugging. Now, to the news of the hour. Brian Walshe, 46-year-old husband of Anna Walshe, is about to be arraigned tomorrow morning in Quincy District Court on a murder rap. Jeff, did you expect this or is it a surprise to you?
Oh, I expected this a long time ago. Well, let me rephrase it. I expected it. I knew it was coming. I just knew that the state police, the Cohasset police, working with the district attorney's office, were getting everything lined up. I suspected this back when the news broke on January 4th that Anna Walshe was listed as missing. And reading the first articles coming out, I knew that this would be coming.
You knew it would be coming. So we're also, and I see, there she is. The woman we've been waiting for, and there she is. She's appearing out of nowhere in the nick of time. She's wiping the sweat off of her brow. Wendy Murphy is here. As I said, she's one of the nation's experts on domestic violence. Wendy, we are live. Are you surprised to learn that Brian Walshe is charged or will officially be arraigned tomorrow on murder charges in Anna Walshe's disappearance?
Hell no. Nobody's surprised. If anything, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that it took this long. And I'll say that one of the reasons I thought it was taking this long, because the evidence seemed so overwhelming that I started conjuring up crazy ideas, like maybe she's in cahoots with them since he's a fraud who, sells fake art. Maybe she's pretending to be dead and they're going to get the insurance. I mean, it was just crazy because it was taking so long. I was really worried that there was more to the story that we don't know. But the other reason I thought it might be taking a long time is because perhaps the DA was going to direct indict him rather than charge him in the district court. And those are 2 different ways in Massachusetts you can get a murder case going. You can charge in the district court, and eventually you have to get an indictment in the grand jury and move it up to Superior Court. Or you can skip the district court altogether and just go straight to Superior Court through the grand jury process, which I thought they might do because they were holding him on another charge anyway. So sometimes you charge somebody with murder in the misdemeanor court just to hold them, but you don't intend to keep them there. So I was thinking that's what they might do. But what we learned tonight, not a lot, but what we learned tonight was that, in fact, he will be charged in the district court, which means we're still going to have to go through, or the DA is still going to have to go through the grand jury process. So he'll probably be held in the district court for a month or so. Meantime, they'll present the evidence to a grand jury and the case will be transferred to the Superior Court where the felonies are tried. And I still think it's an important question for us to ask the DA, what took so long? And I hope the answer isn't, well, I hate when defense attorneys accuse me of rushing to judgment, so I drag it out just so they can't make that point, because that's a pretty stupid reason to delay things. So there may be more to why there's a delay. Perhaps they found blood in a variety of places, which we know, but no body parts, no bones, no body per se. And I can imagine they would have tried hard to find more than just blood, because you can find blood and that doesn't necessarily prove that someone died. So there might be something to that. But it's going to be very interesting to hear tomorrow the little bits more that we're going to get about where the murder charge came from, because they're going to have to say something about why they think she's dead. I mean, we all know what we think about blood in the basement, knives, hacksaws, but you can bet we're going to hear a whole lot more tomorrow.
And Jeff, we're also hearing that this will not be the only charge. According to reports, Brian Walshe will also be charged with improper transport of a body. I know you're not an attorney and Wendy is, but can you speak to that? Are you surprised by the additional charge?
No, I mean, you look at it, right? There's the proper way of transporting a dead body. It's kind of callous when you just come out and say that, right? But I mean, the fact of the matter is if I died in a car accident, the ambulance takes me to the hospital, then I got to be transported to the morgue. There's a way to do it. So obviously there can be laws of if the body's missing, so they know that this could be something in a way of saying, hey, lead us to where the body is, or give us more information that can drop some charges. Who knows, right? But I've found in my experience, whenever you can charge everything up front and then you can dismiss charges to try and get things from the defendant down the road. So it's not a surprise to me. I would say I understand when I just looked at the calendar for a timeline. Granted, we know she went missing, probably killed, I suspect killed on January 1st. Reported on January 4th, right? If we look at the fact pattern, she was supposed to be at work on January 3rd. According to the husband, she said, oh, I have to go to work early January 1st. I'm flying out. But it wasn't until January 4th that the work called him to say, hey, where's your wife? He's supposed to be at work, which leads me to believe right away as an investigator, that's a made up story that I had to leave on the 1st, right? To me, that's what I'm reading into it as an investigator. That's my clue of this guy is guilty of something. But if you think about it, there hasn't even been tomorrow would be two full weeks when law enforcement got involved. I know we want everything now or quick. We want it like what's taking so long. But at the same point, we don't have a body. We can prove murder without having a body, but you have a few more steps to take. So I'm sure they were getting everything they needed to make a good charge. And they took that initial charge to put him away so that they could keep him on ice where he couldn't flee, he couldn't do something else. In that way, they could build their case to get to the point where we are now, where we have an affidavit that will be unsealed tomorrow after the arraignment to see what evidence they have that brought this charge. I think it's fairly fast in right now. I had a case where we had 2 murders committed in September. We proved it in mid to late October. And then we went to the grand jury because we were trying to arrest 62 people. If we arrested 1 or 2 for the murder right away, the 60 other people who were also involved in other murders, attempted murders, would be on the run. So it took us 2 months to get that indictment for 62 people.
That's a very different kind of case, though. Come on.
True, but I'm saying
I don't disagree with Jeff, but here's the thing. To have the whole world watching and the whole world saying, we all know he did it, the evidence is overwhelming, what's going on? There's got to be something to the answer to that question that we don't know yet. It can't just be we wanted to be careful, and it can't just be we didn't want to look like we were rushing to judgment, because even after 2 weeks, people are going to complain, oh, you arrested him too fast. I also think that this other charge, transporting a body incorrectly or something, there's got to be a reason for that too, because if he's guilty of murder, charging him with that other crime is like charging him with shoplifting. It's just a nothing burger. You don't do it unless you have some concerns about the murder charge sticking at this moment in time. So Jeff might be right that although we have the charge, we still have some concerns about whether the prosecutor feels 100% confident that they can show the blood they know about is blood from a dead body, that there is a dead person someplace and not just bits of blood. If they have only bits of blood, a very good defense attorney is going to take advantage of that and play it up. So I'm not sure that would be enough for a defense attorney at this stage to say, hey, judge, I want you to dismiss this murder charge because all they have is bits of blood. And then the prosecutor saying, well, even if you dismiss it, we want you to hold them on the transporting the body in a bad way or whatever the hell the charge is. I'm not sure that's why it's there, but it strikes me as so trivial compared to murder. And the other thing is, because, and this is again related, we don't know, I'm guessing here, but in Massachusetts, there are different degrees of murder, which is true in other states as well. But we have, I think we have every reason to believe this is a first degree murder case, right? But that hasn't been announced yet. And at this stage where there's just a murder charge, there's just a warrant for murder, the prosecutor doesn't have to say whether this is first degree, second degree, manslaughter. They don't have to say. And that's good for the prosecutor because they may still need to discover more information. But if this is first degree and the prosecutor tomorrow doesn't have to declare, but the defense attorney can pretty quickly push for some specificity on what level of charge this is. Is it first degree? If so, what's the basis? What's your bill of particulars on that? What is the basis for your first degree charge? We have 3 types of first degree murder in Massachusetts. First is premeditated murder with malice aforethought. Second is felony murder, meaning you didn't really want to kill her. You were committing a different felony and she died during that felony. And then the third is called extreme atrocity or cruelty. And when you hear about hacksaws and things like that, it kind of makes you feel like that one might work too. But the point is, at this moment, the prosecutor doesn't have to specify. But if they don't have more evidence to give the defense exactly what their theory is and exactly what the charge is it first degree? If so, which of those 3 theories is your charge? Then the case could technically get dismissed, not because everybody doesn't know she's missing and he killed her, but they don't have enough to say exactly what happened sufficient to prove that particular type of murder charge. So again, we're speculating here, but that can be why they tack on other seemingly trivial charges, because there's still a lot they don't know.
And to your point, Flyover Girl had her comment up a moment ago. She just wrote hacksaw question mark, and then Hopahidaho, if I'm saying that right, has a comment up. How can he be charged with murder with no body? Wendy, can you take that since you're the attorney here? And then I'm going to throw it.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jeff can too. First, with regard to the hacksaw, we know from stories before today, and I forget which day it was, that a hacksaw was discovered that we have been told is connected to this case was discovered at one of the landfills where they were searching for evidence, where they believe her body was sent after it was disposed in some kind of a trash can or receptacle. A hacksaw in the landfill, a broken knife in the basement of their home with blood as well in the basement of the home. It gives you that sense. Remember, he's the one who said, how do I get rid of he Googled, how do I get rid of a 115-pound body? No doubt the first thing that popped up was get a hacksaw and a really strong knife and start cutting. Because if you carry out a very long body, it's going to be more obvious to neighbors than if you carry out smaller parts. I mean, I don't mean to be too gruesome, but let's just say that hacksaw kind of jibes with the other evidence that we know, but that also lends to the argument that this was a particularly cruel and atrocious type of killing, which speaks to that type of First Amendment, first degree murder charge that I mentioned.
Jeff, to you, the arrest warrant has also been impounded, which in Massachusetts terms means sealed. Is that standard operating procedure, or is there a reason that they would seal that arrest warrant?
that's routine until he has his arraignment. Everything associated with this charge is sealed. So come tomorrow during the arraignment, afterwards they can say that arrest warrant will be public, right? So when I indicted people in grand jury, that indictment is sealed until we arrest. After when we make the arrest and that person's brought in for their initial appearance, federally we call it an initial appearance. It's the first. Tomorrow it's the arraignment. They're told of their charges, and at that point, to show the judge and the defense what the charges are, the affidavit for the arrest warrant will be made public because it's publicly provided to the court. It'll be out for everyone to read. But anything else will wait for proper discovery. So all we'll have tomorrow is the affidavit to see what they have for the probable cause for this arrest. And again, I guarantee you they have a lot more than what's in that affidavit, and it'll come out later during discovery. But they're saving it for the indictment. So after the indictment, more will be left off, and then every time there's another official court appointment where information is provided, more information will come forward.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that they are going to know 89% of the evidence, and they're only going to share about 32% of it with us tomorrow. There's no reason for prosecutors to share more with us than the bare bones. They get nothing out of that. In fact, it can hurt their case. The more they share publicly, the greater the chance the defense can use that to whip the public into a frenzy, to distract, to create false narratives, get the public thinking that it's some monster someplace else who did it. The worst thing you can do is reveal too much to the public at this point. But because, again, this is the district court, the lower court, the misdemeanor court, which has no jurisdiction over murder cases. You can't have a murder trial in the district court. You have to transfer it to the felony court, and that happens after the grand jury issues an indictment. But once it gets to that stage, once the big charges are brought in the big courtroom where the trial will be held eventually, then the prosecutor will issue what's called a statement of the case. That's not just the bare bones minimum that you need to get an arrest warrant. That's basically everything. That's the statement of their case. It's the statement of the evidence. It's the statement of their theory of what happened. We are not going to get that tomorrow, but we will get it fairly quickly because the law in Massachusetts is pretty demanding. If you file charges against a person charged with murder in the district court, the clock starts ticking. And you have only so many days to get that case indicted before. And if you don't get indicted before that clock runs out, the judge can dismiss the charge. Just dismiss it. Not meaning you can never bring it again, but it gets dismissed because the judge is under a lot of pressure to make sure that the defendant's rights are protected. That means you get your case to the felony court very quickly. You can't just let things linger in the lower court so that you can keep investigating your case. If you take too long and you're undermining the defendant's ability to defend himself or get himself a speedy trial, for example, then the charges will be dismissed, and prosecutors would be horrified if that happened. So we will see action in the superior court, the felony court, pretty quickly, I'd say within the next few weeks.
And Wendy kind of intimated that this murder charge maybe should have come a little faster. Jeff said maybe not. Shivani is sort of the voice of reason here. She says perhaps it took time to prove whose blood had been found wherever Brian Walshe left blood evidence, ? Jeff, to you, is that possible that they were just waiting to confirm the blood that they recovered?
I mean, that could be one thing, yes, but I go back to, as an investigator, I know I have him in custody for this law, for misleading us, providing false statements. I want to make sure I have everything I need because, as Wendy said, the clock is starting to tick, right? I know federally, if I arrest you on a probable cause warrant, I have 30 days to get you in front of the grand jury. So the clock starts ticking. So if I have you in custody, I don't necessarily need to move as fast to get you off the streets because I already have you off the street. I can make my case a little stronger. And So I'm sure there is some testing of the blood, but they're pretty quick at getting things back. But we searched a lot of different places. There's a lot of different things they're going to have to go through. So that could be part of the reason why, obviously. But I think to them, it's still fairly quick getting from January 4th to January 17th. Tomorrow is 2 weeks. Plus, I had you arrested a week and a half ago. I think it's not bad. I think it's pretty bad. I think as a law enforcement officer, I'm not going to come back and say it took too long.
So the Quincy District Court, the district attorney came out and released a statement saying the continued investigation has now allowed police to obtain an arrest warrant charging Brian Walshe with the murder of his wife. Mr. Walshe will be transported to the Quincy District Court for arraignment on the charge of murder. Additional details in the investigation and the evidence in support of those charges are likely to be presented at arraignment, but will not be disclosed at this time. Again, that is set to happen at 9 a.m. Wendy, can we expect, he's currently being held on a $500,000 bail. Is that number going to shoot up after tomorrow?
Oh, I hope so. And it can. He hasn't gotten out yet. So the defense attorney is going to argue you don't need to make it higher because he already can't make $500K. And I think it's $5 million surety, if I'm not mistaken. But this is a guy with a very curious past and some funny financial dealings. I would make that bail as high as possible. I don't know that they can make it no bail. That's pretty dicey sometimes, especially in Massachusetts, where we just can't love our criminals enough. In terms of the law, some people say that's wonderful because we bend over backwards like no other state to make sure everything they want, they get. To me, we bend too far. But so no bail at all would probably be unusual. It's possible, but I'd be surprised if it didn't double or triple as well it should. And by the way, earlier somebody said, can you prove a murder charge without a body? It's likely that more so than how long did it take to type the blood, because they can do that in a heartbeat. Today, with today's technology, I suspect that their real issue was, look, we have blood everywhere. This is a lot of smoke. We know she's missing. We presume she's dead, but we don't have enough blood to prove that she's dead. They might have an ounce of blood, let's say, and we all have lots more than an ounce that we can lose before we die of blood loss. If they had 4 pints of blood and they could type it to her, then you have the equivalent of a dead body because you can't live without that amount of blood in your body. It seems to me that what's problematic about this case, I'm drawing an inference from what we know, having zero actual knowledge, that they probably have blood, but not a ton of it. And they absolutely know it's hers, but it's not enough blood to prove that she's dead. So can you win a murder case with blood, but not enough blood, and no body, but an awful lot of suspicious circumstances? And those circumstances we need to talk about, because there's more than just blood and hacksaws here. And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. Many murder cases over the years in lots of jurisdictions have been successfully prosecuted based simply on the fact that somebody's missing. You don't have any blood at all. Somebody's missing. You have a very strong motive on the part of the suspect. You have a strong motive for them to kill. You can infer, because they haven't been around for a while, that they're dead. The law allows that. And then you have other circumstantial evidence, whether it's statements the suspect made, things some of the eyewitnesses saw. And again, probably the most important thing that you have to have when you don't have a body is a really strong motive. In that kind of case, you really don't need a body. And I don't think prosecutors would hesitate to proceed with this case, even if they never ever find any evidence of an actual dead body.
We have people tuning in tonight from Alaska. Hello to Alaska. Hello to Scotland. And here is a statement from the Cohasset police chief. His name is William Quigley. He wrote in a statement, "We had held out hope that Anna was alive, but the evidence led us in a much different direction. I'm thankful that our detectives, working alongside detectives from the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, were able to bring closure for the family and friends of Anna. Now we will let the criminal justice system do its part. So it is a very sad day because in so many words, he is telling us that Anna Walshe is no longer with us. Wendy, to you, this comment from Jen Lee. Joel, can you guys please verify what I heard today on the news, that this Brian actually threatened to kill Anna in 2014 when they were just dating? Did you hear about that? This report was out last week. I think this was a DC police report that he had threatened to kill both her and some of her friends, I believe, even. But the bigger question here, Wendy, and there's some chatter going on in the comment section about when can you leave? And obviously it is the most dangerous time when you're leaving a relationship. But just with your experience from domestic violence cases, does it surprise you in any way, shape, or form that going back as far as 2014, there are reports that he threatened to kill his wife?
Well, I'm not surprised at all, and I hope no one else is, because it's extremely unusual for a woman to be killed by a partner, a spouse, a husband, a boyfriend, whatever, without there being some past history of violence by him against her. It's very rarely a one-off, a first time, if you will. I can't think of a case in my many years in this business where that was so. But interesting about the 2014 incident, which, by the way, that story broke by a pal of mine, Bob Ward, at Boston 25 News here. He was the one who broke the story in Boston. She did report to the police that he threatened to kill her. The police investigated, and then it was Anna who said that she no longer wanted the case to go forward, which again is very common, unfortunately. But then we know what happened after that. A year or so later, they got engaged and eventually got married. And a lot of people say, what the hell was she thinking? Your guy threatened to kill you. What are you marrying the guy? Like, it's one thing to drop the charges, but don't you then run in the other direction? Well, there's something about men, especially like this. We've heard that he's been diagnosed as a sociopath with a really severe mental health problem in terms of that type of pathology, no capacity for empathy, no humanity, if you will. Those kinds of people can be extremely charming, very manipulative, and they look for people who are vulnerable to latch onto. Someone like Anna, who's newly in this country, who is probably just starting to find her way and feels vulnerable, feels a bit of dependency on this guy, and doesn't see the sociopathy. She's not a therapist. She's not trained in mental health issues. And she certainly may not have access to the kind of support services that we have in this country, where we're teaching women all the time what the red flags look like. She may not have had access to any of that. So to her, him making a death threat might have been just because she might have thought he's having a bad day. He doesn't mean it. And look what happened after that. They get married. They have a bunch of kids. I have to tell you that there was apparently another report later of her, which she posted herself on her Instagram account, of herself with a black eye, blaming a hard marble floor, and that she had fallen for that. Again, common for victims of domestic violence to blame doors and floors for why they end up with a black eye. It's our job, in my opinion, it's our job to never, ever, ever try to blame the victim or shame the victim or ask these sorts of questions. Why did you marry him? What's wrong with you? Why didn't you leave? Not only, Joel, not only because it's dangerous to leave and, let's do what we can to keep women safe and not provoke the guy. No, it's because I don't care what a woman does. I don't care what she says. I don't care if she's a horrendous person. I don't care if she had an affair with the next door neighbor and 5 goats. No one deserves to be hit, period, much less killed. No one ever, period, end of discussion. And until we stop saying things like, why did she marry him? What was she thinking? Why didn't she leave? What we should be saying is, what is wrong with him? Why would he ever think he should be able to boss her around? Who the hell does he think he is, telling her what to do, where to live, where to have a job? how many children to have, where, all of the things we know men do to boss women around. And ultimately, when men don't like how women behave, they beat them, they abuse them, and in some cases they kill them. The only person we should be questioning in terms of how this crazy person made a decision to do such a thing is him. Why did he do this? What kind of a horrendous family did he have? What kind of a monster is he? He deserves our focus and our rage and our anger, and she does not deserve our judgment. I don't care what she did. She did not deserve to die, and we cannot talk about whatever she did and talk about whether she was right or wrong, good or bad, smart or not so smart to do it. She's dead. He's the only person we should be passing judgment about. And until we do that with every single case, women are going to keep dying. And I have to say one more quick thing. Whenever anybody says, why did she say, oh, it's a very dangerous time when a woman leaves a man, that's not necessarily wrong. When a woman says, I'm done with you, I'd rather live in a box by the river than live in a violent, abusive home, that woman should never, ever think to herself, oh boy, if I do this, I'm going to end up dead, or he's going to beat me, or he's going to kill me, or the children, or I'm going to be homeless. We need to provide for that woman so that she can make that choice to walk away and have the house she needs, the food she needs, the money she needs, the support for the children that she needs. If she doesn't have those supports in place, then of course some women are going to choose to live in violence and abuse. It's the only alternative. And for me, until we get those things in place for women who are trying to flee violence, the next thing we're going to be telling women to do is get a gun, get a knife, get a weapon, get something. Because if no one's going to help you, you learn to defend yourself. If he's going to kill you for walking away from him, then you find a way to kill him first. That's my advice to women. Because we don't help women enough. We don't give them any choice. Well, guess what? They'll take matters into their own hands. That's the choice they have today. It's the only choice they have today, because too many women are dying as the only alternative, because they know that if they leave a guy like this, they're going to end up dead. That is not an acceptable choice in this country.
And as a man, I concur with Wendy Murphy 3,000%. We don't only have the best guests, but the most passionate. Back to that Instagram photo, Anna wrote on that caption, mild concussion, bruised hip, and a cut, hashtag vulnerability. And some people were trying to figure out that hashtag. But to Wendy's point, I don't think it really matters. As they say, a picture says 1,000 words. Jeff, to you, New Year's Day, they had a guest over named Jem Mutlu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which I'm sure I'm not. Brian told police that his wife told him she had a work emergency in Washington, D.C. On New Year's Day, that she had to leave between 6 and 7. He said she had to take a ride share. There's no record of a ride share. Then he said he got lost on his way to his own mom's house in Swampscott. Then said that his kid hit his cell phone. I mean, from an investigative standpoint, when does one lie become one lie too many?
Well, I think it started off the moment I mentioned before, right? I think they said the friend left around 1 o'clock or so in the morning, if I remember correctly. But the friend was over New Year's Eve, leaves early New Year's Day, and that's when he finds out there's a work emergency. Who gets called to go to a work emergency on New Year's Day at 1 something in the morning? What real estate agent is working on Sunday, December 31st, and is told you have to get back into DC on January 1st? I mean, and then the fact is, she's a devoted wife, devoted mother. She lands and doesn't make a phone call to check in on the kids, and he never tries to call her until he finds out on December 4th from her work in DC, oh, your wife isn't here. But I mean, as an investigator, again, right now, you're my number one suspect for killing your wife before anything, right? And here he is, he's telling the story, right? How many times do you go from Cohasset to Swampscott? You know you're taking 1A instead of 1. And even if you took 1, okay, you get off at 114, cut through Lynn into Swampscott. It's not that hard if I take 1 or 1A. So right there, you're looking at the guy saying, what's going on? And who loses their cell phones like that today, where it doesn't make sense. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, a seasoned investigator, the moment that comes in, the work calls the police first. Hey, I just talked to the husband. None of us has seen him. It's too long. I knew right away when I read the first article, even before you said, "Hey, have you seen this article?" I knew it, and I was saying that husband is guilty. And I know he's innocent until proven guilty, but as a law enforcement officer, I always let the attorneys, the prosecutors, give they're innocent to prove guilty. I make a case against someone and I make the arrest when I have the evidence to say he's guilty. This is our person. There's no doubt in my mind at that point. And after 25 years in federal law enforcement, I can say on my cases, I've never arrested an innocent person. Everyone I arrested was guilty. I had the evidence. Lock, stock, they're going to jail.
Wendy, the most important part of the story now are obviously these three boys, 6, 4, and 2. And Jen Lee writes, the boys are in the custody of Child Welfare Services. Can you talk about what's going on with them right now? Who might take custody and how that all plays out in the court system as well?
Yeah, I can say what I know, which isn't a lot, and for good reason. Those children are being protected, and I absolutely respect that. They deserve to be loved and hugged and cared for without any of us or any of this bearing on their little lives. They'll figure it all out at the time that's right for them. So the little bit that I know is that they were taken into state custody, which is a bit odd because when one parent dies, even by a violent means, it's not unusual for the surviving parent's family members to take a role, to have a role in taking care of the children. But in a case like this, where we know that Brian's mother, let's just say, we wouldn't be surprised if she came up in some suspicious way. In this case, I'm not saying she's going to be charged, but things are a little bit curious about her. It has been reported that she did not get along with Anna. So even if she were available to take custody of the kids, I don't think anybody would agree that that would be in their best interest. And that's really the question for the courts. Where do we place the children that's in their best interests? And at this point, because Anna, I think she has a sister in Canada and a mom in Serbia, and they're not here. They can't take custody. And I don't think anyone on his side is considered fit for custody on the issues that I just described. So it really does create this orphan status for them, and that leaves the state. Having said that, and the state is not necessarily a bad place. I know people say foster care is horrendous. There are a lot of wonderful foster parents in this state. There are a lot of terrible foster parents, but you can't just sweep with a broad brush and say because they're in foster care, that means they're in terrible circumstances. That's absolutely not presumably true for these kids or for any child. But I know that some of her friends and some people from her ethnic community are talking with the state officials about who might be able to take them. And everybody agrees they should stay together. At a time like this, it's not unusual in an ordinary case for 3 or 4 children from one family to be separated, because it's a lot to ask a foster family to take on 3 kids at once. But in this case, I think everybody agrees it is essential that the children stay with each other. So wherever they land, and it may end up that they land with a friend of Anna's. There'll be some vetting. There'll be a lot of vetting because they are also potentially witnesses who need to be protected with regard to the integrity of the evidence that they know, the things that they've witnessed. So whoever does end up being their long-term caregiver, at least for now, it's going to be someone who understands that they have multiple roles to play, not just care for the children and feed them and keep them warm, but also understand they are potential witnesses in a very serious case, and that their needs psychologically and emotionally, because they've lost both of their parents. Thank God they lost the father to jail. I think their lives will be better for it. But, they're too young to really appreciate that it's good to lose a father like that. So for now, all they know is that the people who loved them the most are gone. Both of them are gone. And that's the kind of trauma that will last a lifetime. No matter how much care they get, that kind of trauma never goes away. So we have to do everything we can to put their well-being first, but mindful of the fact that they are potentially, at least the older two, potentially witnesses to a really important, very serious murder case.
What a horribly selfish act. I've got 3 kids, and I cannot imagine them being separated. That's tough to even hear. Jeff, to you, actually, just on the heels of what Wendy just said, I know you dealt mainly with gang violence, but Wendy just alluded to it. The 6 and the 4-year-old are old enough potentially to be witnesses. How do investigators handle a situation like that? It's obviously tenuous, and you're dealing with super young children.
Well, they have today a lot of police officers that are specifically trained, and a lot of times they have a social worker with them to do interviews with the young kids, just because we've learned our lessons that kids are they're pleasers, right? So you have to be very careful how you do an interview, where you have to ask the questions, you have to do things in a way where they just don't want to say yes and give you an answer you want to hear. You have to get them to tell you. So by doing this training, by having social workers that can help guide the young kids to give answers where you're not putting in their mind. You saw your dad kill your mom, right? Well, I'm a pleaser. Yes. Well, did that child see that? We don't know. So you have to ask questions, and you have to ask questions in a way where you tell us, I mentioned this on another case on your podcast earlier. I know Ann used this. Draw us a photograph of something that you and your family did when you're all happy, right? And they draw nice happy. Draw something recently where maybe things weren't happy, and they can draw something that shows maybe that act of the murder, right? So there's different ways to do it, but you have to do it where you're not suggesting the answer to them. And it's a very tough line to do that. But it's hard when you're dealing with adults, because again, you don't want to give up too much information. You want the person, if someone's talking to you, you want them to confess and give details that only the murderer would know, or the people who responded to the murder would know. So, you stabbed him 3 times, right? Well, yes, I did. Okay, well, if no one knew that, I just told the person, and maybe they just want to confess, right? You say, how did you kill the person? Well, I stabbed him. How many times did you stab him? 3 times, right? That's information that only a murderer would know, or me as the investigator would know. But I haven't asked in a way where that I'm telling him I already know. I'm asking the person the details, right? So that's very important when it comes to talking to not just the suspects, but more importantly, witnesses and victims. And
Yeah.
the kids are both witnesses and victims. We can't forget that. They are victims. They lived in this house, and we keep seeing more things about how he was abusing the wife. He's also abusing the kids. I mean, we heard the one story that maybe he was physical with one of the kids, but even if he's not, even if he wasn't physically, the abuse against the mom is also abuse against the kids. They're learning that kind of behavior, which we want to stop right away, or we don't want to teach, but they're also living in fear because they're seeing how fear their mom is, and they're picking up on it. And so they're just as much as victims as they are witnesses of this.
And one quick thing about kids, because I've had very young kids on the stand, and we don't do this enough. We don't respect children for what I think of as them having a bit of a disability. And what I mean by that is not, a mental illness or some kind of cognitive disability. It's a disability in the sense of immaturity. So they don't even have the capacity to understand complex ideas. So you can ask them a question that you and I understand, and we certainly know what we're talking about. They may not even comprehend what you're talking about. I mean, I can think of a case where this is such an obvious example, right? Except if you just read it in a transcript, you'd say, oh, that child's not telling the truth. But a child who described being sexually abused on a spaceship. And to the reader says, the child said she was sexually abused on a spaceship. She's obviously lying, not credible. The guy must be not guilty. Only if you read the redirect exam. Of course, the defense attorney went crazy and said, it was on a spaceship, right? And was it a real spaceship or not a real spaceship? And the child said, oh, it was real. And, you know, the defense is like, obviously this child is lying. This poor man is innocent. Until redirect, when the prosecutor said, where was the spaceship? And she said, at the amusement park. So it was a real spaceship. It was real to her because she was sitting in it. It was a real ride. It wasn't a cartoon. It wasn't on television. It was real. But only an adult would have the ability to understand the word real as it applies to the difference between in outer space and you know, something that you encounter as a toy or an amusement park ride. So we have to be respectful of children with regard to their undeveloped brains and not judge them by our adult brains and decide that they're credible or not because we don't like the fact that they said it was a real spaceship. That child was extra credible because of how she used the words that she used correctly for a child her age. And we need to come down to her age instead of use, you know, adult ways of judging them. That's just one example. But the other thing is, yes, you shouldn't lead witnesses with leading questions. We all know that's a bad idea. You don't want to put ideas in someone's head. But for a child who doesn't understand the concept of murder, has absolutely no idea what it is, what it means, doesn't understand blood, doesn't know that humans die, doesn't know, just because they might have seen mommy with a lot of blood doesn't mean they understand she's hurt. I mean, there's just so much we have to understand about the child's brain that they could perceive something that you or I could watch and we understand and see it in a certain way, and they don't. So in some ways, you do have to lead children, not with suggestive questions that put information in their minds, but getting them into the comfort zone of being able to talk about the bad thing that happened. So when you ask, so I don't disagree with Jeff that you have to ask questions like, did something happen that scared you? Because they can pretty much answer that. But you might get 4 hours of, well, then I was at the playground with Johnny and Johnny flung the shovel at me. And, you know, everything scares children. So you do have to get them focused, and you have to get them focused in a way that serves the needs of the case, respects their disabilities as children, and then, in my view, you know, make sure that they're not exploited. When defense attorneys have young kids on the stand, they basically take advantage of their diminished minds, if you will, and they will, you know, it's grotesque what they do, almost poke fun at the kids because they don't understand big words or they don't understand complex ideas. And in my career, one of the things I've been fighting about on behalf of children in my you know, activism as an attorney for children's rights is trying to come up with a way that forbids defense attorneys to do that. It's almost like making fun of a witness because they're Black or Jewish. I mean, we don't tolerate that in the name of justice for other categories of people, but for some sick reason, we do tolerate it when a defense attorney takes advantage of, exploits, or pokes fun at a child. Even though in other ways we all accept and realize, like, children's brains aren't done developing, right? It's why we don't send juveniles to the death penalty, because their brains aren't yet done developing. We don't hold them to adult standards. Why? Their brains aren't done developing. Well, that's also why we need to treat them with more respect when they testify as children, and not take advantage of them to try to win an acquittal for an obviously guilty killer or rapist or what have you.
Well, I would also add to that, and you mentioned it earlier, and I understand the defense is supposed to put on a good defense for their defendant. But at the same point, I also think it's very wrong that we allow defense attorneys to shame women who are victims of crimes, whether it's domestic violence, rape, whatever, right? Oh, weren't you wearing a short skirt? Who cares? She can wear whatever she wants to wear. She's still not asking to be raped. But women are treated as you
Yep.
asked for it. And
Women and children are allowed to be disrespected. When I prepare victims who are my clients now, even though I'm not a prosecutor, I work in the criminal justice system a lot on behalf of victims. And when I prepare them for their testimony in a criminal case, anticipating the defense attorney is going to ask them something like what Jeff just said, I give them zingers. I say, don't you ever answer that question just yes or no. You give them a mouthful back. And I give them really good lines to spit back that shames the defense attorney. Most victims aren't prepped to do that, but my clients are. And even if they end up not testifying, they feel so empowered, that instead of being afraid of taking the stand, now they get up there and they're like, I can't wait to testify. And if he asks me that question, they feel so
Can
happy.
you give us an example? If someone did say that to your client where your skirt was short, what would you tell them? How would you tell them to respond?
Well, just one typical example, which is kind of like what Jeff just did. I don't want to give away too many secrets.
Just one.
But let's just say a defense attorney said, well, you did go out for drinks with him that night, right? And you got pretty tipsy, didn't you? And, having a victim say, instead of yes or no, just say, yes, and you go out drinking too, don't you? Something like that. Or, well, you kissed him, didn't you? And I have her say, yes, those involve my lips, not my vagina. Things that are just, and then defense attorneys hate the word vagina. So even that, what I'm mostly doing with my clients is making sure that they know they're not beholden to the question, yes or no. Did you kiss him? Because then she's stuck in his narrative. I always say, never answer yes or no. And if you can answer yes with some sassy comeback, you do. I don't want them making anything up. I don't want them lying. But if he's going to imply that something she was wearing, meant that she deserved what happened, you can always turn it back on the defense attorney. And, does that mean if you didn't put your wallet tight in your pants, that someone who steals it, that's your fault? If you didn't lock the front door to your house, then it's your fault if the robber comes in. Is that what you mean, Mr. Defense Attorney?
One of the comments says, preach. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to add, defense attorneys like to get you to say yes or no only. And there's times where a yes or no, and it takes practice. To me, testifying is a skill that we're losing in law enforcement because, at least federally, we don't have a lot of trials. I had a lot of trials in my work. And prosecutors kept teaching me early on that certain times yes or no are fine, but make sure you learn when you can push back. And I had a judge yell at a defense attorney because I want a yes or no answer. And I said, well, you didn't ask a yes or no question fully. It deserves an explanation. He pounded, and the judge said, I want to hear the answer, and it's not a yes or no question. And then he got snippet with the judge, and I've never seen a judge lose it on a defense attorney like that ever. And so, yes, Wendy's absolutely right. You need to rehearse with your witnesses and come up and play defense attorney and say, these are questions that they're going to ask you to throw you off your game so that they can get practice. And as she said, give that witness, that victim, the power to say, okay, yeah, I was wearing a short skirt. It's my right. I'm not asking to be raped because it's not right. Those are the things that you need to do to give that woman her sense of power back, because that's a crime where she loses that power. And now it's something she needs back. And this is one of the ways to give it back.
And that's exactly my point. A lot of victims say, I don't want to testify. I heard it's really scary. I don't want to testify. I heard cross-examination is going to be awful. First of all, it's not usually awful, because defense attorneys know damn well if they're brutal to a victim in front of a jury, the jury's going to use that against their client and vote guilty faster. So it doesn't typically happen like that. But even if they're rough with a victim, if you can get the victim to feel like she's going to get a zinger out and she's okay and she can handle it and she can anticipate the questions, then she doesn't go in there terrified of cross-examination. She goes in there knowing what to expect and she's ready for it. And she might even get a little, zinger in. So there's nothing scary about cross-examination. That's what I say to my clients. It's not awful. Even if there's something awful about it, so what? You don't want to live with yourself the rest of your life saying, oh, I didn't testify because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Well, I'm not sure, but some people told me it was scary. Those kinds of victims, the ones who don't testify, even with children, the research shows if we protect children from testifying on the theory that it's going to be too traumatic for them to take the stand, those kids don't do so well in the long run. Same is true for adult victims. They don't do as well in the long run as the ones who testify, win or lose. The ones who testify, win or lose, feel good because they've done everything they can. They were in an important room with important people. People listened to them. They were respected. They were heard. The rest is out of their hands, but they did as much as they could. I had an 8-year-old boy on the stand many years ago, and his parents weren't even allowed in the room when he testified. And he was nervous, but he wasn't terrified. But then he had to sit there and stare at the man who raped him. And that scared him, not the cross-examination, staring at the man who raped him. So he, years later, this is the story I heard back because I asked the mom afterwards, some years later, how did he feel about testifying? Because, it was kind of a question, should we let him testify or not? And years later, I asked the mom and she said, he talks about it now like this. He says, I was in the room and I was really afraid of that guy who hurt me. And he was staring at me really hard. So I looked up. Instead of looking at him, I looked up at the flag and there was a gold eagle at the end. And I just stared at the gold eagle and I said, that's me. I'm a gold eagle. I'm a strong gold eagle. So that's his memory of the trial, that he was a strong gold eagle. He doesn't remember cross-examination. He doesn't remember anything else. His memory is that he was in a courtroom and he was a powerful, strong gold eagle. That's how he feels about the trial system today. That's not what we tell kids. Oh, you should be afraid. It's terrible. It's scary. We tell women, oh, cross-examination is awful. No, we need to tell them stories about being the strong gold eagle because that's really what it is. And justice matters. Win or lose, justice means being heard, holding someone accountable. It matters. And in the long run, the people who feel like they had their best shot, they do very well psychologically and emotionally.
There's a comment here from Carolyn Schmidt that's not on the screen. She says, yes, I totally agree with this woman speaker, ! This is not just any speaker. This is Wendy Murphy, one of the preeminent voices in the United States against domestic violence. She's an attorney and a passionate one. This next comment's been up for a while from Diana, and I'm going to send it right back to you, Wendy. What's up with Brian's lately? We've got Brian Laundrie, Brian Koberger, Brian Walshe. Do you think Mr. Walshe allegedly killed his wife for life insurance money? ? My question to you, is there a singular motive, a common motive in domestic violence? Is it a control issue? Is it a money thing? Is it a combination? Is it none of them? Fill us in.
Well, as for the life insurance issue in this case, Jeff may have heard the same thing. I have no confirmation of this, but I did hear that there was life insurance. And this is a guy with money problems. So who knows whether that played a role? It may not have been the only factor. To me, when there's money to be had, when any crime that's committed could lead to that criminal getting money, you got to look at that at the number one motive. But as domestic violence goes, if especially in a case like this where there's a history of control and abuse, it's almost regardless of money, she was probably going to end up dead. Probably. I shouldn't say for sure. Because domestic violence isn't about motive. It's about the dynamic of the relationship. It's about the nature of a man who has control over a woman having that behavior escalate, usually because there was an inadequate law enforcement response over the course of time. That is almost invariably the pattern that leads to femicide, that is a man killing a woman. It's that he was abusive in the beginning, police got called, and when he got to the courthouse, he was let go. Almost always the police are the ones willing to do the hard stuff. The police are willing to arrest, throw him in jail, lock him up. And it's the police who get frustrated when the prosecutors, who by the way are elected officials, so they're often pandering to whoever's getting them reelected, whoever's paying for their reelection campaign, they're the ones who will go soft on crime. Let's have bail reform. Let's have decarceration. Let's defund the police. They're just trying to get reelected. So they'll embrace these soft on crime policies, which may be appropriate in certain cases. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other about all those things. But when you apply soft on crime policies to men who beat women, you always get escalation, both in terms of incidents. So you get more incidents and they get more and more serious over time, sometimes ending in death. There's a study from California that makes this point. It's so powerful. The data is so powerful. It's embarrassing that all counties in this country don't embrace the solution. It's so obvious. But in California, in year one of the study, there were, I forget the number, but let's say it was 53 murders of women by men in this one county in California. That first year, they adopted a no-drop policy, meaning anytime a woman reported domestic violence, the case could not be dropped, even if the woman wanted it dropped, if the guy threatened to kill her, whatever the reason, the case could not get dropped. Not that every guy went to prison forever, it just couldn't get dropped at the woman's request, because it was clear that if the woman was requesting dropping the charges, it was really the guy requesting dropping the charges. And that meant that these abusive men had total control over the criminal justice system. And that's why so many women were dying. That was the theory. So in year one, whatever the number was, let's say it was 53 dead women, over the course of the next 8 years or so, they had a mandatory no drop rule. No matter what the woman said, the case would not be dropped. And at the end of the study period, the number of dead women was 7. Maybe it was 8. I know it was a single digit. That's how powerful it is. It saves women's lives when you don't go soft on batterers. Period. End of discussion. And if you do go soft on batterers, if you do give them control over the criminal justice system by letting the woman drop the charges, which is the same as letting the man drop his own charges, for no other crime do we let a person charged with an offense choose to drop the case. It's the government's case. But for domestic violence, we literally let the woman tell the government what to do, drop the charge. We don't let her tell them to file the charges, but we somehow let her choose to drop the charges. And here's why. If she ends up dead, the prosecutor gets to blame her. So, here you end up with far fewer dead women in this California study. And everyone knows about this research. And yet in Massachusetts and in many states, but Massachusetts is especially bad at this. If a woman is beaten, the police go to her house, they arrest the guy. The police know he's done it many times. The police are furious that he keeps doing it and keeps getting let out. They bring him to jail. He goes to court the next day. The day after that, the woman says, I want to drop the charges because he's threatened to kill her if she doesn't. The wheelhouse goes and back he goes to the house. And it happens again and again and again. And it gets more and more serious. And sometimes the woman ends up dead. That's how it works in Massachusetts. That could well have something to do with why Anna Walshe is dead. We haven't heard yet that this guy has a history of domestic violence with regard to Anna making reports and him getting away with it. I haven't heard that, other than the 2014 threat to kill that he made to her in Washington, D.C. But the fact remains that this is a man who threatened to kill her in 2014. And over the course of time, he was the stay-at-home, didn't work. Apparently, I don't know what kind of job he had. He doesn't appear to have had a job that I've read about. She was the one working her butt off, climbing the corporate ladder, making money for the family, earning more and more money. And he had total control over the situation. He was the guy in charge. And when things went south, either she wanted to leave him, or who knows what the ultimate straw was that broke the camel's back. Either it was a life insurance policy, maybe she's sleeping with somebody in DC, who knows? The point is that didn't come from nowhere. they had a dynamic, they had a relationship where he was abusive, he was controlling, he was obviously a sociopath, diagnosed as such, and she ended up dead. That was predictable, if you ask me. Now, of course, we're all going to say with hindsight, well, now that we know what we know, it's with hindsight. Every single one of these dead woman cases where there's a history of abuse, where the court system didn't do anything, that is going to be a homicide where we all say, with hindsight. We're all going to have hindsight. When does hindsight become foresight? I haven't reached that stage yet in Massachusetts. I don't know when that ever happened.
There is a comment that's not up on the screen, but Jeff, this is for you. Carlene Boney writes, there are still places where there's a good old boy system. I was supposed to be grateful that the arresting officers, I don't know what the actual incident was, went through sensitivity training after the fact. I'm curious, when you're in the FBI, did you have to go through some sort of sensitivity training, or did other agents have to do that in order to make sure that you were, dealing appropriately with people?
I've never gone through any kind of training. I imagine, well, you have to remember in the Bureau, well, I was lucky in the sense I worked gangs, so I did a lot of street work. Most FBI agents don't interact the way police interact with the public, right? So you have a police officer pulls a car over, maybe during that stop while giving a ticket, that police officer does something that requires some kind of punishment. And in this case, in what this person is saying, something happened where they weren't appropriate, so they take sensitivity training to say this is what you need to do the next time you interact with women during an arrest. Who knows? I have seen a judge order a U.S. attorney to attend ethics training, an assistant U.S. attorney to attend ethics training. The judge thought the AUSA had done something wrong and said, for punishment, I want you to take ethics training. So I'm sure if I had done something wrong in my career, which required some kind of training, it could have been ordered or done. It just never happened to me. I didn't see it happen to anyone. But I do know that we always take training every year, and we have lots of different trainings that we would take just to make sure that we were properly doing our jobs, whether it was additional training on the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment.
The law.
Exactly, right? How to interact. And there's lots of different things that go on. I just know that if they've had to do some kind of training that was due to something that they did during an interaction with the public that required that they were wrong, maybe not to the point of being fired, but needing some additional training to make sure they don't do that again.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I'm not surprised to hear that. Even in the state system, there was never any, I was a prosecutor, there was never any training on being biased against women, but the bias against women was endemic. In fact, the systematic biases that I have seen against women in all types of courts in my career have ranged from judges talking dirty, literally in front of women. I was admonished not to wear pants in court. That was disrespectful. I should wear a skirt. Go figure. I was forbidden a 15-minute break to breastfeed my newborn after a judge ordered me to try the case in the middle of my maternity leave. She was 2 weeks old. I had a sitter with me. I said, I need to take a break. I mean, I'm going to burst my breasts. And he said, we don't take breaks for that in this courtroom. I've seen judges instruct jurors to consider evidence in a rape case in a way that allowed them to judge a woman harshly in a way that was not allowed against a man. And here's the thing that I think people don't realize. This is so built in and baked into our DNA. It's baked into our Constitution. Remember, women don't yet have equality under the Constitution in this country. When the 14th Amendment was adopted in 1868, and it granted all persons equal protection of the laws, which basically means equal treatment in all courts at all times under all laws, women were excluded. Women didn't even become persons under the 14th Amendment until 1971. Think about that. That's why we couldn't serve on juries, depending on your state, but under federal law, couldn't serve on juries, couldn't get credit in our own name. I mean, I could go on. 1971 was basically yesterday. So that kind of built-in systemic sexism is in all of us. It's in all judges. It's in all lawyers. It's in all defense attorneys. It's in all jurors. And it's not, there's no rule that forbids lawyers to take advantage of sexism to try to win. I once said this, I was debating Roy Black, who defended William Kennedy Smith in the famous rape trial in Florida. I was on some CNN channel, and I said, "Oh, come on, you played the gender card. You know damn well what you said." And he goes, "The gender card? Who ever heard of the gender card?" And I said, "See what I mean? You don't even think we have a card." But of course he played the gender card. He started asking the victim what kind of bra she was wearing the night of the rape. And it had nothing to do with anything, but he wanted her to talk about it because it was a lacy bra that had some seeds on it. It had nothing to do with anything. And he said, "No, I just asked her about it because, you know, if it wasn't torn, then maybe she hadn't been raped." I said, "You wouldn't have mentioned that bra if it had been a stretchy white training bra and she were flat chested AA. You wouldn't have mentioned it at all, right?" And he was like, "Well, you know," because he's admitting exactly what we all know. If you can exploit sexism to win, you will, because no one's stopping you. Now, it just so happens that we're paying a little bit more attention to the problem these days, but there's still a lot of sexism that goes on that people think is acceptable. And so sometimes we have had mandatory trainings for law enforcement. I'm aware of some research, for example. This is not for Jeff's kind of law enforcement, because again, he's not really dealing with these sorts of cases, but for law enforcement who deal with violence against women cases, there's research that shows if you train them to deal with the problem of being biased against women or having, you know, unfair ideas about how they behaved or judging them harshly because of something they did before the crime, for example, if you want to try to fix that, because you know cops who are disproportionately men bring that bias with them when they go investigate cases. So they send them off to trainings where they learn about it. Well, the research shows that cops actually get more biased after the trainings because they learn how not to appear biased. That's what they take from the trainings, how not to reflect that bias in their reports. That's what the studies show. You can't teach somebody not to be biased. It's in you. It's in you. You have to do self-reflection. You have to understand it's implicit. You have to be willing to think to yourself, I may think I'm all that. I probably think I'm a great investigator, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I am biased. Maybe I should be self-critical enough to think to myself, I'm not really fair to people as much as I should be. That kind of training doesn't exist. That's about becoming a humane being. You know, that's someone who wants to be better, working on themselves. And you can't learn that. You can't teach somebody not to be racist. You can't teach somebody not to be sexist. You can teach them how to hide it, but you can't teach a person to change. They have to change themselves.
Interesting. There's a comment that's once again not up, but I like it, from Purple Amaryllis. We don't get to have guns in the UK, to Wendy's earlier point, but I'm sure I could get creative with household implements if needed. And she's got emojis of flashlights, brooms, hammers, etc., scissors.
Yep.
This next question, Wendy wasn't fired up enough, so I brought in this comment to rile her back up. If he threatened to kill her before marriage, why on earth would she marry him? Makes no sense to me. We're back to blaming the woman, right, Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wondered the same thing because I'm as defective as that questioner is, right? I asked the same question. And that's because I'm as sick in my own culture as anybody. But I have to be honest and say that even though I'm curious to know why she married him despite his threat to kill her, I'm also very comfortable saying, and I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn why she married him. Maybe I wouldn't have done the same thing, but who cares? It's not me, and it's not my place. And whatever the reason she married him, even if she married him for all the wrong reasons, let's make it as bad as possible. He said, if you marry me, I will kill you. I will make you give birth to 3 children. I will get a life insurance policy on you, and I will kill you. Let's say he said that. It's still not her fault, because you can't just kill. You can't agree to be killed. You can't sign up to be killed. It's not legal to submit yourself to be killed. You can't even agree. People don't know this either, but it's against the law in this country to agree to let somebody hurt you badly. If somebody wants to hit you in the head with a baseball bat and you beg them to do it, you say, please do it. I really want you to hit me in the head with a baseball bat. They still can't do it. It's still illegal, period. You can't hit somebody in the head with a bat, even if they beg you to. So it doesn't matter why the person's begging you to. It doesn't matter what they did to cause you to feel entitled to hit them in the head with a bat. You have no entitlement whatsoever. No entitlement as a man, no entitlement as a man who, was able to give this woman a place to live. No entitlement because you're a man who provided for her. You've got nothing. You don't own her. You have no power over her. You've got nothing. And men need to get that in their thick skulls. You have no power over women. You think you do. And it's when you start to think you do that you end up in trouble, because you then think you can hit her. You then think you can punch her. Well, that's why you go to jail, idiot. So don't do it. Just don't do it. That's the way not to get in trouble. Just don't hit her. Easy.
I grew up with this woman. I knew right away men have no power. She still dominates me.
Well, they have power. They just don't have that power. You don't have any power to hurt. Women don't have power to hurt men either. That's not part of life. You don't have the power. You don't have the entitlement. Period. Nobody does.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Right now, this arraignment is scheduled for the morning. What are investigators needing to do and still doing right now as we speak?
It's a great question. It's hard to answer because we don't know what they have and what they don't have, right? So it's hard for me to say everything that they're trying to do. I imagine they're still probably, if they already haven't found the body parts. They haven't told us everything they found. They've given it. We know certain things they found. The blood in the basement, the knife, the broken knife with blood on the basement, the hacksaw, the hammer, some of the other things. But did they find other things? Have they found body parts like an arm, a leg, a torso? We don't know. And so if they found that stuff, great. If they haven't, they're still looking. They want to try and find everything to make their case as great as we can, because we keep hearing all the time, circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is just as strong as direct evidence. It's great evidence. But the thing with circumstantial evidence is you need different types of circumstantial evidence to show the whole picture, right? We can go back to Idaho and we're hearing, their cases, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence and we can take it apart one by one. Yes, if we said all we have is the car, you need a lot more proof, right? But you take the car, you take the phone, you take this, you take that, all together, circumstantially, we have a great case. So right now, what do we have? We know he's lying because he's already been charged. And when you look at what he's saying, I went here. He was very clear. I went to the Whole Foods. I went to my mom's. I went here. I got ice cream or a shake. Went here. All very details. What did he not say? I went to Home Depot and bought $450 worth of cleaning supplies. I'm not going to remember one thing out of all the other details. I got lost on the way to my mom's house. My phone, right? Here's how we know he's lying. And again, I know in a court of law, we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I get that. That's the lawyer's job. My job as an investigator is I know. Now, can the lawyer put me on the stand and have me convince with evidence beyond a reasonable doubt? I'm sure they will be able to do that. So we have the lying, we have the Googling. of how to take apart the body. We have the blood in the basement. And to go to your point, you can lose a half a gallon of your blood, which is a lot. Take a half gallon of milk, dye it with strawberry, throw it on the ground, see how big that stain gets. That's how much blood you can lose and still live. So we don't know how much blood they found. Have they found more than a half gallon? If they have, then they can probably say, we now know she's dead because you've lost a half a gallon plus of blood, right? But we have the blood. We have the other evidence. So circumstantially, we have a damn good case now. But we can always want to make it bigger, stronger. So, what do they have to do? They're probably going to go back now. Have there been calls for domestic violence to that house before? Have neighbors seen? Have there been fights? What's been going on? Right? What can we determine so we can make our case stronger? And that, frankly, as an investigator, it doesn't stop until you go to trial. You'll always investigate just to tie up any loose end. And we just don't know what loose ends they have right now.
Allie Snow comments, get this woman a YouTube channel stat. I wouldn't miss a show. So Wendy, you better get on it. This one last comment that we'll get some closing remarks. This one is from Jen Lee. I agree to a point, Wendy. He's a monster, but let this be a lesson to abused women out there. Please, please go to a shelter. Please get out. Wendy, what is your message with all your experience if someone is in a compromised situation right now and probably needs to get away?
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about the get yourself to a shelter option, even though I think people who are in danger should go to shelters, absolutely. But here's the thing. Women go to shelters that are usually confidential because there's a man who's so damn dangerous that she needs to be protected. Well, the shelter then becomes like a jail for her. So she ends up in jail. We call it a shelter because he's walking free in society. He's not in jail. I got a problem with that because if there's a guy out there who's so damn dangerous that we have to lock up a woman in a shelter, shouldn't he be in jail? I mean, this is not, did he commit a crime, therefore he should be convicted, but we have things called Section 12s. Every state has one where you can put somebody in a facility if they are a danger to themselves or others. Can't we be creative about this? That if a guy's dangerous to a woman, just put him in a mental hospital for a while pretend you're getting him a tune-up while you're giving her a safe place to run off to. That's my dream. I agree with the comment that it's too bad women sometimes make the choices that they do, but they do. And sometimes it's because they're from horrendous homes where they watched abuse by their father against their mother, where they learned that kind of abuse is normal, not just normal, but perhaps they feel it's kind of a form of affection because that's their family. That's what they know. And we have no business judging people who get mixed up about what's good and what's bad because they can't help it, because they were born into hell and they don't know the difference. So it's not our job to say, oh, she shouldn't have done that or she should have left, because that's how we feel coming from our life circumstances. And it's not fair for us to impose that on others. Having said all that, to any woman who feels there's abuse going on anywhere, and I don't care if it's you're living on the streets in a tent and you're suffering abuse by another person who's also homeless. I don't care if it's in some kind of public housing project. And I don't care if it's in a mansion in a fancy town like Cohasset. The thing is, women from all walks of life suffer the same kinds of abuse at the hands of men. And the reason they do is because they're women. Because we live in a country where men are allowed to dominate women under the law, under the culture. We don't let women have equal protection of any laws because our Constitution has never given women equal protection of any laws. That's why we were fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment. It was recently ratified, but it's being blocked by Joe Biden. It was blocked by President Trump. I mean, until women have equality under the law, they are going to be beaten, raped, and killed at very high numbers, at very high rates. Because if you're a second-class citizen without equal protection of the laws, you're not going to be equally protected by the laws. It's that simple. So what do women need to do? What's the great equalizer while we're waiting around to become fully equal persons for the first time in history in America? There are only so many choices. One is that in my opinion, we should all be trained in weaponry. Whether you have the ability to access a gun or not, learn how to use one so that it doesn't become something you're afraid of if you have to confront it. Learn how to use it. If a guy uses a gun against you and you go, ooh, like it's a mouse, he's going to have enormous power over you. Learn how to use weapons. Become trained in how to shoot. Go to the range. You can go to ranges sometimes for free. Police will help you learn how to shoot. Become empowered by the ability to use weapons. Take self-defense classes. Take whatever kinds of learning experiences you can and turn them internal so that you develop that sense that you are worthy and that no person has a right to control you. And then if you can, connect yourself with other women who are strong, who you can lean on, who you can call, kind of like AA, right? When people are trying to get sober, they don't do it on their own. They've got a buddy they can call, their sponsor. Make sure you have someone you can call. Always stay in touch with the police. Never be afraid to call 911. Always work on finding a safety plan, a place where you can go if you have to, and never wait until it gets so bad that you think he's going to kill you. If you get to the point where you think someone is going to kill you, kill them first. And I don't mean kill them, because you think they're going to kill you tomorrow. I mean, if someone's coming at you, they're about to kill you, kill them. Like, you're allowed to kill in self-defense, or if they're going to hurt your children or kill your children, you can kill in self-defense. We don't teach women that this is legally the law. We don't teach them the skills necessary to protect themselves against lethal violence. We just keep throwing them to the wolves. Here's a restraining order. Well, a restraining order does nothing. It doesn't stop a bullet. It doesn't stop a knife. We do so much to disempower women that when they do end up dead and we toss our hands up and say, well, we saw it coming. That's the kind of guy he was. Too bad she didn't leave. We've been saying that for 100 years. It's not getting better. More women are dying today at the hands of men than ever before because our legal system has failed women at every turn. This is just one case among many. And it isn't about Cohasset. It isn't about a wealthy woman and some mentally ill shyster who had a bad day and needed money. And it isn't about the impoverished women who live in public housing projects. This happens to all women because they are women and don't have equal protection of the laws as a constitutional matter in this country. And until women do get full equal protection rights, they are going to die in very high numbers. That's a message from this story. And between now and when we do become equal, we have to become armed. We have to do something to give ourselves some degree of strength against this disproportionate power that men have. And we're either going to get rights or guns. That's what we need to say to the government. Give us our rights or we're going to get guns. That's my message.
That is sobering advice. Kill or be killed. Tim Butler says she's dead wrong on that front. And then the next comment says from Pale Fox, she is so on point. So you see people already debating what Wendy just had to say. Meanwhile, the man in that comfy looking chair is Jeff Wood. He is a retired FBI special agent out of Boston, focused on gangs and gang violence, and is a seasoned investigator with more than 2 decades experience in law enforcement. Jeff, you sort of summed up a little while ago what you think investigators are doing. I'm curious, do you think it is a good idea for women to get trained in firearms? I know I am not trained in how to use a firearm, and I oftentimes wish I was. So just curious on that take and any final thoughts.
Absolutely. I think everyone should learn how to use a firearm because they're tools, and used properly, it can definitely help save your life. Not only should you get training in how to use the firearm, but you should also get training on when to use the firearm, right? there was a case many years ago in Boston where, again, domestic violence. I don't know if the woman ever reported it beforehand, but she had been the victim of domestic violence. It happened. The guy left, slammed the door, and then she came out and stabbed him. And then she was prosecuted for murder because the DA said, look, the domestic violence had ended. He had left, and then she chased him down, right? And here's a horrible case where here's a woman who was abused, and now she's in jail for murder. And if you get trained on saying, okay, I have my weapon, I know when to use it, the guy's coming at me, you can now know how to explain why I used the weapon when I did. And you're not going to be charged with murder. And it's going to show self-defense. And that's so important because we want the person who's using deadly force to be able to explain why they're using deadly force, because if you don't explain it, it can be turned against you, and we don't want that. And we don't want a victim to now become a double victim, right?
Yeah.
Here she is, a victim, and now she's a victim a second time because now she spent I think she may just have gotten out, but she spent 12 to 18 years in jail. And here she was a victim. And this wasn't the first time she was a victim. She'd been a victim from different men throughout her life. And what a sad story we have here. And so it's learning how to use a firearm, how to safely use a firearm, and more importantly, how to make sure you keep that firearm out of the other person's hands, right? Bad people train to take that weapon away from you. So if you've never been trained on it and you pull it and you don't know, oh, this gun has a safety, I did take the safety off it, click, and now I can, let's say I'm the bad guy, right? Oh, click, because you didn't know to take the safety off. Now I take the gun. Now I have the gun to use against you too, right? So that's why it's so important to get training, so that way when you get into that situation, fine motor skills go away, right? Your adrenaline's going through the roof. People react differently. Some people get tunnel vision. Other people get wide vision. Some people, everything goes really slow. Other things, people move really fast. And so people can forget. But if you've practiced and you've trained, I pull my gun, I do this, boom. Even when you're in that moment, now the skills that you've learned through training just take over and you do it. And that's what's important, and why a woman who's had that training will be able to defend herself when it's needed, right? And so
by the way, I'm not even saying women should all go out and get guns. That is not what I'm saying, because I want fewer people to have guns. That's my personal opinion. But what I am saying is I want men to think women might have guns. I want men who are abusive to worry that a woman might have a gun in her bra. I want men who are abusive to fear that maybe she's out learning how to shoot. I want more men to assume that they can't be aggressive and try to kill her because they might end up dead. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish. I wish no one would have guns. And I'm certainly not saying women should all go out and get guns. I am saying women should be trained in weaponry, whether it's knives, guns, or whatever, just self-defense with your body. Become fierce, because that'll make everything better for you. When you're less afraid, when you're less weak, the person who's going to take advantage of your weakness is going to have a harder time doing that. So just as an equalizing thing, like try to build your fierceness. But on the gun issue, I totally agree with Jeff. It can be very dangerous for a woman to have a gun, very doubly dangerous for a woman to have a gun who's not trained in how to use it, because that's like giving the guy the gun. And that is the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. You have to be trained. More so than get a gun, you just have to be trained. So go get trained, and don't even get a gun, but get trained. That's critically important.
Great guest with great advice. Wendy Murphy. She serves as adjunct professor of sexual violence law at New England Law, where she also co-directs the Women's and Children's Advocacy Project under the Center for Law and Social Responsibility. She's a former visiting scholar at Harvard Law School. Wendy prosecuted child abuse and sex crimes cases for many years, and she does it all. She's been on TV. She's about to start her own YouTube channel. Edie Pertee, wrote this final comment that we'll let Wendy take. No one deserves to be a victim of domestic violence. Murdering someone you profess to love is the most cruel form of power and control. With that comment, your closing thoughts, Wendy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right? Nothing bothered me more when O.J. Simpson said something like, I wouldn't have killed her. I loved her too much. To me, that was like a confession. That's exactly the kind of thing an abuser with the capacity to kill says. I couldn't help myself. I loved her too much. And you people have to understand, I killed her out of excess love. There's nothing loving about it. Any man who says that he loves you and as an expression of that love needs to know where you are at all times, needs access to your cell phone and your passwords and all. That's not love. Absolutely never will become love. And that's a person who has the potential to kill. That's what I say to young girls when I talk in high schools, colleges. They sometimes think that extra form of affection, all that attention, flowers after flowers, and boy, he just won't let me walk home from school alone. He loves me so much. That is never love. And we need to start teaching that at very young ages to girls so that they see it for what it is, pathological and ultimately potentially homicidal. It's that simple. I agree with that comment and then some, that if you've killed anyone that you profess to love, you never loved them, period.
Very interesting take. You hear that, OJ? Listen, thank you both so much. This was really insightful. We got the latest on the Anna Walshe case. Her husband Brian facing murder charges now. Quick programming note. Tomorrow, we have Nancy Grace on the podcast. Send us your questions. I've got about a half hour with her. So get us your questions, and we will ask Nancy Grace anything you'd like, and then we'll be back with another episode of Surviving the Survivor. For now, love you, America.